You ever wonder why so many of us think the same thoughts, repeat the same phrases, feel the same emotions at the same times? Like we're all tuned to the same invisible frequency. That's not a coincidence. It's not just culture or coincidence or human nature. It's design, your mind, your beliefs, your reactions, even your silence have been shaped by forces that don't have your well-being in mind. They've been shaped by systems designed to capture your attention and slowly alter your perception without you even realizing it's happening. Now, I don't say this to be dramatic. I say this because the neuroscience is clear. Your brain is incredibly plastic. It rewires itself constantly based on what you see, hear, and feel repeatedly. So imagine what happens when the majority of your daily input, news, entertainment, social media, even search engines, is filtered through platforms and algorithms created not to inform you, but to mold you. Platforms that prioritize emotion over truth, conflict over understanding, compliance over curiosity. You think you're consuming content, you're not. You're being conditioned. We used to fear brainwashing as something dramatic, something you'd see in dystopian movies, headsets strapped on, eyes pried open. But real brainwashing is far more elegant. It looks like your favorite influencer casually repeating a worldview. It looks like a headline designed to trigger your amygdala before your prefrontal cortex gets a chance to think. It looks like endless scrolling where you're being subtly taught what's acceptable to think, say, or believe. The poison doesn't enter through the front door. It seeps in through the air. So slowly you don't even notice you're breathing it. And here's the hard truth. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between truth and repetition. The more often you hear something, the more likely you are to believe it, not because it's accurate, but because your brain equates repetition with safety. That's how propaganda works. That's how advertising works. And that's how entire populations come to hold beliefs that are completely divorced from reality. Beliefs they'll defend with their lives, not because they truly understand them, but because they've been neurologically wired to feel safe within them. Think about the sheer power of that for a second. If I can control what you're exposed to, if I can filter what you see, hide certain truths, amplify certain lies, and drown you in outrage, I don't need to control your body. I already have your mind. That's a level of control that doesn't require violence. It requires compliance. And compliance is easiest when people believe they're acting out of free will. This isn't about paranoia. This is about reclaiming your attention and your autonomy. Your attention is the steering wheel of your life. If you give it away to people whose only interest is profit or power, don't be surprised when you end up somewhere you never chose. What you consume shapes what you believe. What you believe shapes what you do, and what you do becomes who you are. Now, the good news, because there is good news, is that neuroplasticity works both ways. If your brain can be programmed, it can be reprogrammed. But that requires effort. It requires intention. It means stepping back and asking, is this thought mine? Or was it given to me? It means learning to sit with uncertainty, to tolerate nuance, and to pursue truth even when it's inconvenient. They've poisoned your mind, not with chemicals, but with ideas, repetition, and fear. But the antidote isn't outrage, it's awareness. And awareness is where freedom begins. There's something most people don't want to admit. Not because they're dishonest, but because it's uncomfortable. It's this comfort is addictive. And like any addiction, it rewires the brain in subtle, powerful ways. In the short term, comfort salves you. But in the long term, it can cage you. We live in a time where nearly every task, every decision, every form of discomfort has been engineered out of our lives. You don't even have to think deeply anymore. Everything from opinions to directions to solutions is served to you instantly. Convenient, fast, easy. But here's the trade-off. We've outsourced thinking to machines and institutions that don't necessarily have your best interests in mind. Now, from a neuroscience standpoint, your brain is designed to conserve energy. It's always looking for ways to automate. That's not laziness, it's efficiency. But when you constantly live in a loop of dopamine hits, short videos, quick responses, frictionless everything, your brain starts to downregulate the circuits responsible for effortful thought. It literally becomes harder to focus, to reflect, to delay gratification. That's not a character flaw. That's biology responding to your environment. So when people say things like, people don't think for themselves anymore, they're not wrong, but it's not because we're incapable. It's because most people haven't had to. And when they try, it feels uncomfortable, like lifting a weight you haven't picked up in years. That mental resistance. That's not weakness. That's neuroplasticity at work. The brain adapts to what it's exposed to most. And right now, we're being exposed to passive consumption, not active inquiry. And this is where it gets dangerous. Because a comfortable mind becomes a passive mind, and a passive mind becomes an obedient mind. When everything is designed to keep you comfortable, emotionally, intellectually, socially, you stop questioning, you stop stretching, you avoid the difficult conversations, the inconvenient facts, the complex truths. And eventually, you lose the instinct to challenge anything at all. This is exactly what the system wants. A population that feels good enough not to question, distracted enough not to notice, and overwhelmed enough not to resist. You end up living in a world where people would rather feel safe in their beliefs than risk the discomfort of finding out they were wrong. That's not intelligence. That's inertia. One of the most alarming things I see today isn't just the spread of misinformation. It's the loss of cognitive resilience, the inability to hold two opposing ideas at once, the refusal to consider perspectives that don't already align with what's comfortable. That kind of mental fragility isn't natural. It's trained. And it's reinforced every time we choose convenience over clarity, every time we'd rather be right than curious. If you want to reclaim your mind, it starts by reclaiming your relationship with discomfort. You have to learn to sit with the unknown, to dig past the surface, to ask yourself not just what's true, but why you believe it's true. That process isn't efficient. It's not quick, but it's necessary. Because here's the truth: in the pursuit of truth will always be inconvenient. It requires effort. It requires contradiction. It requires facing parts of yourself and the world that are difficult to look at. But it also leads to strength, to clarity, to freedom. And if we don't start building that strength again, if we keep choosing ease over engagement, passivity over purpose, we don't just risk losing our critical thinking. We risk losing our ability to choose at all. Wake up before that choice is made for you. Something strange happens when you step back and really observe the patterns. Not just in the media, not just online, but in conversations with people, in social dynamics, even in how we view ourselves. You start to notice that many of the conflicts we find ourselves trapped in are strangely predictable. Racial, political, generational, ideological. All of them lit up with urgency, all of them packaged with clear villains and heroes, and all of them somehow designed to keep us in a heightened state of emotional reactivity. Now, From a neuroscience perspective, this makes perfect sense. Conflict drives attention, and attention is the most valuable currency in the modern world. The problem is that when your brain is constantly flooded with emotional stimuli, anger, fear, outrage, it hijacks the neural circuits responsible for long-term thinking, empathy, and reflection. When you're in survival mode, you don't think in nuance. You think in absolutes. Us versus them. Good versus evil. Right versus wrong. And when you're kept in that mode, by headlines, by algorithms, by carefully curated narratives, you become incredibly easy to control. You're not reasoning. You're reacting. And this is by design. The people who benefit from this division are not the ones arguing on the front lines. They're not the ones posting 50 comment threads or showing up at protests to scream at each other. No, the real beneficiaries are the ones you rarely see. The power structures, the institutions, the corporations. They don't care which side you're on. They care that you stay angry, stay distracted, and stay busy fighting people who are just as manipulated as you are. This tactic isn't new. Historically, it's called divide and conquer. Politically, it's called controlled opposition. Biologically, it's called limbic hijack. You trigger the emotional centers of the brain, the amygdala, the insula, over and over again until rational thought becomes secondary. And once you're there, it doesn't matter how smart or educated or experienced you are. You become predictable, controllable. You lash out at the nearest perceived threat instead of stepping back to ask why you're being told to hate them in the first place. And what's tragic is that we're often attacking people who aren't even the cause of our suffering. We're directed to blame the other political party, the other generation, the other identity group. Anyone but the systems that have quietly extracted our wealth, our attention, and our autonomy. The more we hate each other, the less we look up. And the less we look up, the more those systems entrench themselves. This isn't just psychological, it's physiological. Chronic division creates chronic stress, and that stress rewires the brain. Over time, people become addicted to outrage. They seek it. They feel empty without it. And the platforms that feed this know exactly how to serve it. Precision, targeted emotional spikes that keep your nervous system activated and your mind distracted. But there's another path. You don't have to react to every provocation. You don't have to pick a side just because someone told you it's the only way to matter. You don't have to confuse tribalism for purpose. If you can pause, just pause and ask, who benefits from me being angry right now? You'll begin to see through the illusion, because the people you think are your enemies might just be victims of the same manipulation. And once you see that, everything starts to change. There's real power in refusing to play the game, in stepping out of the loop, in remembering that the ultimate rebellion isn't shooting louder, it's thinking clearer. There's a moment in life, sometimes quiet, sometimes jarring, when you realize you've been living on autopilot. Your habits, your opinions, your daily rituals, they didn't all come from you. They came from repetition, from exposure, from subtle and persistent influence. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. It's unsettling at first, but it's also the beginning of something powerful, the ability to reclaim your mind. Now, from a neuroscience standpoint, this isn't just philosophy, it's physics. The brain is a prediction machine. It learns patterns from your environment and then begins to operate based on what it expects to happen. That's how you walk. Talk, drive, think, without having to consciously focus on every tiny movement or detail. That's efficient. It keeps you alive. But that same system can work against you if what you're exposed to day after day is fear, division, distraction, and manipulation. Because what gets repeated gets reinforced. And over time, those external inputs become internal beliefs. You don't just consume them, you become them. And here's where it gets dangerous. If you never take the time to examine those beliefs, to ask yourself whether they serve you, or whether they serve someone else, you risk living a life that isn't really yours. That's not being alive. That's being programmed. And if you're not aware that it's happening, you'll confuse obedience with peace, numbness with contentment, distraction with fulfillment. I've said this before, and it's worth repeating: the mind is plastic. It changes based on what it's exposed to consistently. And the good news is that this neuroplasticity is a two-way street. Just as your brain can be wired to stay passive, reactive, or afraid, it can also be rewired to become alert, discerning, and courageous. But that doesn't happen by accident. It requires intention. You have to choose what you feed your mind. You have to decide which signals you allow into your nervous system. You have to pause and say, is this thought mine, or was it handed to me? Does this belief move me closer to strength and clarity, or further into fear and confusion? That kind of questioning, that's where the real work begins. And I won't lie to you, this isn't easy. Breaking free from mental programming feels disorienting. At first, Jin-san, you'll feel alone, you'll feel uncertain, you might even feel anxious. But that's not a sign you're doing it wrong. That's a sign you're waking up. When you stop numbing yourself with convenience and begin asking hard questions, the brain has to adapt to that new input. It has to rebuild new circuits. That's where growth happens. That's where strength is built. And the more you do it, the stronger you become. Not just mentally, but biologically. Your stress response becomes more adaptive. Your focus sharpens. Your tolerance for discomfort increases. You become the kind of person who can think clearly in chaos, who can make decisions rooted in truth, not just emotion or manipulation. Diligent son, that's what freedom looks like at the level of the nervous system. Most people are waiting for someone else to fix the system. But the truth is, change starts at the level of the individual. One person who's awake, truly awake, is more powerful than 100 who are simply reacting. And if you can do this work, if you can reclaim your mind, you not only liberate yourself, you set a new standard for everyone around you. This isn't a metaphorical war. It's neurological, it's psychological. And the cost of staying asleep is your agency, your clarity, your life. So break the spell before it becomes permanent.